going on, everybody? Welcome in the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, I want to go over some of the major changes I want our Minnesota Vikings to make after the Super Bowl that just went down last night between the Chiefs and the Eagles. So I'll go over my takeaways, then how do the Vikings actually make these changes during the NFL offseason. That's coming up on today's show. Before we do so, if you guys watch the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Eagles, just give me one major takeaway you had from Super Bowl 59. Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. So some of my top takeaways were, number one, trenches win. That's everybody's takeaway from the Super Bowl, I feel like. You know, all these GMs, we'll see how reactionary they are in terms of addressing the offensive and defensive line in free agency and the draft. But there's no doubt the biggest reason, in my opinion, why the Eagles won last night was because of their offensive and defensive line. Then also, they are built through the draft. And that's something I think the Vikings need to improve, as Kwesi has not been able to draft over the last couple of years. We'll dive into that a little bit more on today's show. And then also sign players early. And I got a picture of A.J. Brown here for a reason. I'll give you guys those thoughts here in a little bit. But kind of the outline today's show, I want to first start off with how can the Vikings actually improve the trenches, whether that's free agency or the draft, and then also talk about a Myles Garrett trade, as I am way more open than I was to trading for the Brown star edge rusher before the Super Bowl, and then draft improvement. And then also, could the Vikings extend Jordan Addison early? Well, it worked out for the Eagles in terms of extending some of their wide receivers. But how do you improve the trenches? I think the biggest way you can do so is during free agency. So as it stands right now, in 2025, the Vikings have around $61 million to spend in free agency, and there's a lot of conversation. Should they go after offensive line? Should they go after defensive line? I think it's more likely than not that the Vikings will target the offensive line in free agency over the defensive line. So quickly, I want to run through 5 guys here that the Vikings could bring in. Number one, Trey Smith. Kind of got his ass handed to him last night versus Philadelphia Eagles. Now, he was going against Jalen Carter, but he's supposed to get a bag. He's projected to get around 4 years, $84 million in free agency, and he is the top guard out there. But also look out for a guy like Mekhi Becton as well, as I think the Vikings could target him. But what about Drew Dalman? Now, if the Vikings decide to cut Garrett Bradbury, and we'll get that report before free agency, I could see the Vikings going all in. A guy like Drew Dalman only going to get around $12 million per year. Maybe he's a guy that the Vikings could target to solidify that center of the offensive line. But you also got a guy like Will Fries at the guard spot. He's not going to get as much as a guy like Trey Smith or Mekhi Becton, in my opinion. But again, he would be a very solid option at the interior. But if you wanted to go more plug and play in terms of guys you could assign on one-year deals, I've talked about Kevin Zeitler a lot. He will go for about a 1-year, $6 million deal. He's 35 years old, turning 36, but he was fantastic for the Lions this offseason. Then also Brandon Scherff, guard for the Jacksonville Jaguars, 33 years old. He has been connected to the Vikings a whole lot over the past couple of years. So you got 5 guys plus somebody like Mekhi Becton where you could target these guys super, super hard in free agency, and I think that's what the Vikings are going to do. Now, Ben Gessling put out the report a couple of weeks ago that the Vikings will target the interior of their offensive line number 1 in free agency, and then you could go defensive line in the NFL draft. And I think, if you're just looking at, like, all right, offensive lineman free agency, you got a lot of depth there. You got a lot of top-end talent. And then you look at the draft, you got a lot of depth at the defensive line. So I think that's how the Vikings are going to play it. But one guy I would want the Vikings to sign here at the defensive line spot, we talked about Osa, the Dallas Cowboys defensive tackle. But what about a little Milton Williams? This guy was all over the field last night. He is just 26 years old. He was drafted in the third round back in 2021. So he's expected to get paid. And honestly, if you sign this guy for a 4-year, $80 million deal, I'd be all over. I think it would be a good signing for the Minnesota Vikings. So maybe they go like a guy like Drew Dalman, plug and play at the offensive guard spot, toss a lot of money to Milton Williams. Maybe that could be the situation. But let's just say they do target offensive line, then shift their attention to the NFL draft for the defensive line. Here are 5 names that I think they could target. Now, my number 1 guy on this list is the guy you see on the far left of your screen right now, Kenneth Grant. Now, number 1, he's got that Michigan connection with J.J. McCarthy, but this dude, I think he was a little overshadowed playing next to Mason Graham this past season, but he is a mauler at the interior of the defensive line. You also got guys like Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, Tyleek Williams. I like the idea, Purple Persuasion, the Twitter account threw out there. Could the Vikings recreate the Williams wall where you go get Milton Williams and you draft Tyleek Williams? Don't hate that idea, but also got Deion Walker, 6'7", 350-pound interior defensive lineman from Kentucky. So there are guys out there, but I do want to talk about one guy, and we put let him dance here, just let him walk for Cam Bynum. Listen, he's a free agent this offseason, and you already got Byron Murphy set that free agency, but I think that's more likely than not they will get a deal done to bring back Murph to the Minnesota Vikings. And just watching the Eagles game and the Chiefs game yesterday, I think you got to let him walk or you got to let him dance here. Listen, I just think he's probably going to get around $11 million in free agency. You got a guy like Theo Jackson, a high-end backup safety. Even if Harrison Smith retires, I'd rather have them just promote Theo Jackson to the starter spot, let Cam Bynum walk, and then that gives you more money to address the trenches in free agency. Because, again, number one takeaway I had from the Super Bowl is that the Vikings in the trenches are so far off from the Eagles, and making moves, tough decisions, like letting Cam Bynum walk, is a great way to just get more funds into the trenches during the NFL offseason. But I just gave you guys a lot of names. But you guys just got to give me one here. Let's hear it. Name a lineman you want the Minnesota Vikings to bring in during free agency or the NFL draft. Let that name be known down below in the comment section. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go on Kenneth Grant, defensive lineman from Michigan. But you guys, let me know your thoughts down below. Now we'll get the more around the Minnesota Vikings here in a second. But first, I do want to tell you guys about today's presenting sponsor, and that is Factor Meals. Now, if you guys head to factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off, you guys will get your first box plus free shipping 50% off. So get started at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off and use promo code VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Now, if you guys are ready to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can feel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. And Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared for any active and busy lifestyle. Now, here covering the Vikings at Chat Sports, I live a busy lifestyle, and sometimes I don't always feel like making a full home-cooked meal when I get off of work, and that's where Factor has stepped in, and it has absolutely changed my life. They're ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. So if you guys want to change your life, head over to factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off and plug in that promo code VikingsChat50 off, and you guys will get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code VikingsChat50 off at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. I got that link for you guys in the comment section and description of today's show. All right, I do want to talk about Myles Garrett here because after watching the game last night, I think the Vikings just need more dominant and blue-chip players along the defensive line. Now, I love what Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, what they have done for this organization over the past season. They were dominant under Brian Flores. But both of those guys can't even compare to what Myles Garrett, is on the football field. So I am way more open to a Myles Garrett trade after the Super Bowl. I was kind of 50-50 on it. Like, would I want to give up a first and a third and possibly Dallas Turner? Probably not. But after the Super Bowl and watching what the Eagles defensive line just did to a, not a great Chiefs offensive line, but it's definitely serviceable, I am way more open to this idea because if you got more blue chippers, got more guys that can absolutely wreck games, Myles Garrett is the definition of that. So what could a trade look like? You could toss them Dallas Turner, first-round pick from last season, edge rusher, give the Browns another young edge to kind of fill that void that Myles Garrett would be leaving. Then I think you would have to attach, obviously, your first-round pick and your third-round pick. Is this enough to get it done? I am not sure. I could see a lot of teams like the Bills, even a team in our division like the Packers and the Lions, upping their trade offer to Myles Garrett after the Super Bowl. But, there is no doubt Myles Garrett, still one of the best players in the NFL. He's great against the run. He's great at setting the edge. He can put his hand in the dirt, just play typical defensive lineman. But if you do want to stand him up and he can just pin his ears back and wreak havoc on a game, he can do that. But 14-plus sacks in each of the last 4 seasons and 17-plus tackles for loss in each of the last 4 seasons. And also, he stays very, very healthy. So my take on it, go get him. Go get him, Kwesi. And, it's not like a dire position of need. Like if there was an all-pro corner like Patrick Siepman was out there on the market, I would be pounding the table for the Vikings to go get him. But, edge rusher, you could maybe put Andrew Van Ginkel into more of a hybrid linebacker, edge rusher role. Then you go trade for Myles Garrett. And then could you imagine if you got your two guys on the interior, Myles Garrett, Jonathan Grenard on the perimeter, and then you got Andrew Van Ginkel kind of playing every single position? I would be all in on it, but you guys let me know. Would you accept this trade? If the Browns call you and they're saying, hey, we're willing to move off Myles Garrett, but you got to give us Dallas Turner, 2025 first, pick number 24, and a 2025 third at pick number 97, would you accept this trade? Give me an A for accept or a D for decline. Another takeaway I had was got to give credit to the Eagles general manager, Howie Roseman. And I think it is clear he is the best drafting GM in the NFL. And, you know, after watching the Eagles, and I was like, how is their team so stacked? Like, how do they have all this money to get all these elite high-end players? Well, they did it because they drafted them. And over the last 4 drafts, I mean, Howie's been fantastic. I mean, you guys see in 2021, picked up Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson, and Milton Williams, all blue chippers. 2022, Jordan Davis, Cam Jurgens, Nakobe Dean, all pretty much blue chippers there. 2023, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith in that draft. And then this past season, you were able to pick up 2 corners that help solidify your secondary, Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell. That has been Kwesi's weak point. He has not been able to draft. He has not been successful in any of those days. And really the only impact player Kwesi has drafted has been Jordan Addison. And I think that was almost a pick you walked into. It wasn't like he was kind of, seeing around a corner and making a crazy draft at that spot. I think he kind of just walked into his lap. But he has been able to draft in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th rounds. And we've seen Howie Roseman dominate those rounds. So we'll see if Kwesi can improve it. I'm sure that's a big reason why the Vikings haven't extended him just yet. But speaking about Jordan Addison, I want to talk about 2 receivers the Eagles locked up earlier than they needed to. So they gave A.J. Brown a 3-year, $96 million deal, $32 million a year, even though A.J. Brown isn't as productive as, some of these other guys making $30+ million a year. You can still feel his impact out there on the football field, even though the raw numbers may not show it. But also, they locked up Devontae Smith a year early. 3 years, $75 million. So what do? I would take that Devontae Smith contract and offer it right away to Jordan Addison this offseason, because this wide receiver market and the NFL business is booming right now. I think Howie, his ability to kind of see around corners and extend these guys early is why the Eagles roster, top to bottom, was one of the best rosters ever constructed in the NFL. Dominant in the trenches. You got elite skill position players. I mean, really, at every single position group, they have blue chippers and they have depth all across, every single position group out there. So, a lot to take away from the Super Bowl. Have a lot of thoughts on it. Big self-reflection time for the Minnesota Vikings, and we'll see what they do this offseason. But if you guys made it to the end of today's show, just give me a skull down below in the comments section. I'm also on Twitter. That's a handle at Pat Sieps. If you guys want to give me a follow over there, I'll give you guys a follow right back. But we'll see you guys next time. As always, Skol Vikes.